So next we have up is Robyn England. Now Robyn England she's a consultant at Ignitis. Ignitis is a niche consulting firm specialising in using the discipline of project management to achieve business excellence in the SME as well as not-for-profit sectors through process involvement, project design and delivery. Robyn specialises in utilising the perspectives of change management and knowledge management disciplines within projects, leveraging learnings that already exist within organisations, ensuring that impacts on people are handled mindfully. So if you could all please welcome Robyn to the stage. Thank you.
Make this work. Okay, so first of all, let's just address the elephant in the room, which Kate's already done a little bit, which is it's that time after lunch where everybody might just potentially be getting a little bit sleepy. I was showing this presentation to a friend who works in the not-for-profit sector who's got a fantastic sense of humour. She said, oh, for goodness sake, just call it a graveyard, stop and be done with it. Potentially the least productive part of the day, or is it? Actually, there's some new research that indicates that actually at this point in the day we're actually, sorry, I forgot my other picture. Let's not be doing that. But apparently there's some new research that indicates that at this point in the day we're actually more able to access the right-hand part of our brain, that more creative part. So let's hope that where we're at is more just relaxed and receptive and able to take in some ideas. In order to assist with that, I've included quite a lot of pictures in my presentation, which I do own, Kate, I'd like to say. I did go out and buy them. I knew I was following on from you, so cool, all right. So yeah, I probably don't need to say too much about more what I do. I've had a lovely introduction. And so what I said I was going to talk about was some common misconceptions that people have about project management, what it is, what it's for, how it uses lessons learned, some key terms that are used in project management, and hopefully translating them into language that will actually resonate better with people in the not-for-profit sector, some benefits to the sector in actually embracing these disciplines. Ooh, what have I done? I've turned it off. Thank you, Jason. You're a star. And hopefully some practical hints and tips that you can take away and start to use in your organisations to start getting your organisations thinking about this and how it might work. Make sure I'm pressing the right buttons. So my story, I like to sort of jokingly say that I grew up in a not-for-profit. I don't mean literally as a child, although there's probably an element of truth to that as well. But I worked for quite a few number of years in a large not-for-profit in the UK that was in some ways quite commercially focused. We had an initial contract with the UK government that we were delivering that grew exponentially, became a real political impetus to deliver this. And so the company grew alongside the project, and the company were very wise. Sorry, I was concerned the last time it was bouncing a bit, so I didn't want to do that. Sorry. They were very smart as a company and in terms of embracing some of the commercial disciplines that were available that were becoming more to the fore at the time, things like project management, change management, risk management, some of those sorts of disciplines. So in some ways I had this funny experience of having that wonderful experience of working for a not-for-profit and the satisfaction that went with feeling that we were really making a difference, but also having had some of that commercial training as well. So, but then subsequently I found myself working in a really tiny not-for-profit, 7 or 8 people, and suddenly realised that actually I had some experience and some training that was really valuable to them, that was a bit different in the sense that the training I had as a project manager had given me, all the other people in that organisation, they all had some of the same thinking and same skill sets, but not in the same comprehensive way that I did, in the sense that, I found there were pockets of it. There would be some people in one area that were really good at risk management, but that thinking wasn't translated through to another area where perhaps they were having to run an IT project as a business improvement thing. Or, they might be fantastic at risk management when they're looking at some granting out and how they were managing that program, but not necessarily taking that thinking across to where they were running events and it wasn't that joined up thinking. So ever since I had that experience, I've just had a real passion for really wanting to share the experience that I've had that was that more commercial experience and just how that applies in this sector. So I hope that fits with Maria's why that she shared with us earlier. So that's my story. So what's your image of project management? When I talk to people, I think some people think it's quite big and overwhelming, involves lots of paperwork, overly complicated, maybe a bit like this, that sometimes the management of a project can be bigger than the project itself. In terms of sectors, people probably tend to think of it in relation to IT, government, construction, banking. Those are the ones that immediately come to my mind, and other people I've spoken to. And there's lots of big words too, words like artifacts, I don't know if that's a word you've come across in relation to project management. The next thing I was going to say, I realised I probably shouldn't because of the company that we're in, but I was going to say, have any of you ever been in a room full of people who are all part of the same profession, and they've all got almost like a completely different language they speak? I was going to say, have you ever been in an entire room full of accountants? But I realised that might not be a very clever thing to say. I might be marched out of the room, but or even in people's hobbies or whatever. But have you ever been in a room full of people who are all into something in particular, and you're not that familiar with it, and it can feel like they're speaking a completely foreign language? So, and look, the project management profession is no different to that. So, and I just think it's an alienating thing. So everybody's got a word cloud these days. It's the in thing. So I thought I better have one. We better have one. So there's all these words. I don't know how many of these words are familiar to you that you sort of resonate with. Anyone? This is a bit of a negative word cloud, right? Some of these words you might have heard, some of them you're like, what? Okay, PMBOK's one of the project methodologies, and Prince 2's the other one. Okay, so how we at Ignitis would like you to view project management, okay, as a tool set. So hopefully that's starting to feel a little bit better, or is it? I don't know about you. I'm actually a little bit illiterate when it comes to tools. I don't know what those are called, and I have no idea what they're for. So, look, it's a good idea, but maybe it's still just a little bit too complicated. How do I know what tool? I don't know what it's called, and I certainly wouldn't know what to do with any of those. Okay, but it's a start. We've moved a little bit further on from the negative word cloud. Okay, so what do we do next? We're going to keep calm, pick and mix. Okay, this book here, this is the manual for Prince 2 project methodology. I know, look at faces. It's really useful. If you need a proper door open, it's fantastic. Or if you're one of those people who likes to press flowers, you know, it's sufficient weight, you can put flowers. I know, I am messing. But unfortunately, what people don't do is get to the back part of the book where it actually talks about two really important concepts, which is scaling and tailoring. Any dressmakers in the room? Or one over there. Okay, scaling's about size, tailoring's about fit. Okay, so scaling's about the right size for your organisation, taking the principles and developing artefacts, documentation that you can work with that's the right size for your organisation, the right size for the particular project that you're trying to run. Tailoring is about using those terms that your organisation understands when you're building that documentation, and the right tools for your requirements, having the right set of documents so that it's simple and effective, and gives people what they need. Okay, so hopefully we've moved on to a more positive way. So I guess this is probably the image that I'd like you to have, to take away with you of project management, that we're thinking about it as families of tools. So these are some of the sort of higher level principles that project management aims to address. I'm going to talk quite a bit about business case in a moment, about organisation, about quality, plans, risk, and change. There might be one more. Oh, progress. So these are all areas that project management aims to address. But I mean, in a really big project, multi-million-dollar project, you know, if for risk is an example where you might have 3 sets of things that you're actually, you know, a whole massive risk plan, a risk register, and then individual risk assessments for different areas. It's massive, okay. But in a smaller project, you still need to address risk. You would still need to have something in your high-level project plan that actually at least outlines at a top level what those risks are, and some kind of register that you could roll your risks and issues up together, but you'd need to just address them in some way. But you can just roll it up and make it the right size for your organisation. So I don't know about that other image with all those other things, but that's sort of my tool set. That's the level I'm at. So hopefully that might feel a bit more comfortable. Okay. So what actually is project? I'm not going to get into the definition of project. That's a whole other thing. But what project management? Okay. If I ask people to put up their hands, who's ever made a mistake? I'd like to think that everybody in the room put their hand up. If you're not putting your hand up, you're probably not human. But if you've made a mistake and you've progressed it to a lesson learned, everybody still with me? Yeah? But who's then taken it that step further, where they've actually taken it and developed it into a process? Any hands still up? Yeah? Cool. So, I mean, here's an example, right? One time I was putting some laundry on and the machine wasn't quite full, and I looked down at the jeans I was wearing and went, oh, they could really do with going in, put them in, pulled the washing out, and found to my devastation when I hung everything out that there was my mobile phone sitting at the bottom of the washing basket. So I made a mistake. I learnt a lesson. But my process that I needed to develop around that was actually about having checking of pockets as sort of a process. So what I'd like to sort of put to you is that project management is actually about having it's about lessons learned. And these methodologies like Prince2 and PIMBOK, whatever, they've come out of a lot of difficult lessons that were learned by big people, big mistakes that were made, very expensive mistakes made by the British government, that kind of thing. So that's really what the methodologies have been developed, is to actually save you from yourself to an extent and see if you can learn some of those lessons secondhand. So my definition of project management is the application of critical thinking, lessons learned, and structure to the process of getting stuff done. So I hope that's a nice, simple one that you could take away. That's in your notes. Okay, so one of the things I said I was going to talk about was language. In Prince2 methodology particularly, we talk a lot about business cases. So I've tried, that's in blue, in green I've tried to put up some things that I think are actually potentially a language that you might use in this sector. So social return on investment, program logic and theory of change are some that I've come across in this sector. If anyone's got any others they can think of, you're welcome to shout them out. But I just thought, sometimes we use this language and people are just like, what are you talking about? So I hope that if I sort of put some out there that I've come across, when we're talking about a business case, we're talking about some of these same sorts of concepts that you might be familiar with, depending on what sort of an organisation you are and how you work. But essentially what a business case needs to address is why this, why now, some context around that, what will success look like when we've actually run this project, how will we measure it at the end, how will we know that we've achieved what we set out to do. And ideally that would involve some cost benefits analysis. And I'm hoping that Derek will approve of this in terms of what he's had to say to us this morning about governance, wherever Derek is. Thank you. Okay. And I'm going to come on to this later. It's just a little side note that getting this stuff right also helps with change management. Oh, my animations have gone all wrong. Never mind. So in terms of designing a project, I thought maybe we could just do with a mental image that would just help connect you to some of the ideas. So you might think, well, why would you need to design a project? Don't you just make a list of things you've got to do in a certain order and just do them? Yeah, that's true. And actually that critical path piece is actually really important to getting your project right. But this is a bit more about the sort of oversight and governance piece to an extent as well, in that you develop a business case. See what my animations are doing. Oh, God, I've done it again. Oh, there it goes. So what happens is you've decided what you're going to do. You've started running your project. You've got a stage. It's what we call a stage. And then there's a whole lot of stuff going on. It gets really busy. It gets really crazy. And then, so in order to make sure that we're staying on track, we actually stage the project out. We create things that we call gates. And what we do is we surface and we come back up from all of that crazy trying to get the project happening. And actually, it's a really important point to actually map those against some key decision points and actually refer back to that business case. who knows what's changed in that time? You know, political situations can have changed. The reason you started the project in the first place, it's just it's a checkpoint, and especially particularly with really long projects that are going to go on for a great length of time. It's really important to have those points where you just surface and refocus and plan your next stage. So referring back to the business case, we like to do, and then we do it all again. And you could take the analogy a bit further and think that governance is actually about considering, well, who ordered the sandwich. Okay, business case, again, why it matters. Okay, so I've actually put up two different scenarios here that these happen in the commercial world as well, but I think they're actually equally applicable to the not-for-profit sector in that potentially your projects are going to come about in two different ways. An internal scenario is what basically, it's something that you have decided yourself within your organisation that you want to run this project with your own budget. But in terms of developing this business case, it really needs to be very much that it's coming out of your strategic corporate objectives. You then have a program of work, potentially, depending on the size of your organisation. Some of you smaller NFPs are probably sitting there going, what's that? If you're bigger, there may be a program of work, and then an individual project. And what can happen is that the person who's at the bottom really has actually not got sight of what's gone on at the top. So the point of the business case is partly to have this source of truth about why we started out to do this, what it's about, where this project has come from, what's the thinking behind it, which again is a really useful tool in terms of governance of your organisation and the changes or projects you're trying to deliver. And then there's another scenario that happens if you're the sort of not-for-profit who might actually be applying to deliver a program on behalf of the government, for example, where there's potentially like an external sponsor to your project. So there's that scenario as well. So again, you'd have the program logic of that let's assume it's the government for ease of explaining. And then there's your logic in terms of why you decided to apply for that contract, what that was about. And then there's your program logic for that. You've put that in your bid and you've said, we're going to deliver this project. This is why, this is how we're going to go about addressing that problem. And hopefully that's why you've won the contract. But again, you've got someone down there delivering the project. And so if the business case actually includes some context and reference to all of those layers, it's really helpful for the person who's actually running the project, but it's also helpful for the people above in terms of governing what's going on. And, so in terms of visibility, really, and accountability. I think I've said this again already, but again, I mean, projects involve change. It can involve changes to people, how people work, what they're doing, and people are just that much more on board with it. If you've actually built this business case and you actually, they can see what the thinking is behind it all, they're usually actually just that little bit more positive and more wanting to actually get on board with the change that you're trying to create. It also helps when new people come on board. If, as a new board member, for example, for them to actually have that source of truth of previous decisions that were made and how they were made and what the thinking was behind them, or someone, a new person coming in and actually delivering, project job roles change, all sorts of things. So having that's business case as that source of truth. And when I say business case, I have this argument a bit with Michelle, who I work with, who has worked on some massive global projects. And again, when I say business case, she thinks I mean a doorstop document. I'm not talking about a doorstop document. I'm talking about something, it might only be 1 or 2 pages, but it's something that just sets out those key things that I was referring to earlier. I think I said I was going to talk about benefits for the not-for-profit sector. Again, my gorgeous friend who I ran this presentation past said, you've got to talk about the Whiffen principle, which is the what's in it for me. As in, not me, you. What's in it for you? Okay. So I think there's hopefully, from what I've said so far, it's obvious that there's potentially some better outcomes by using some of this methodology. You've got projects that align with your strategic objectives, your client's strategic objectives, projects that deliver the right social return on investment that you're aiming for, better management of risks. It'll potentially help you to win government contracts if that's something that your organisation actually aspires to do. And happy stakeholders. I haven't talked a lot about stakeholder management. That might be one for next time. But it's also a better process. Everybody, whether you're steering the project or whether you're actually involved in running it, hopefully just has a little bit more of a sense of control. there's a measurement of success that's defined up front that helps with that. There's visibility for management and board. There's clear decision points for steering. That's what, going back to the image of the sandwich. And stakeholders are involved early, because I didn't say with the business case, please don't think stakeholder management is something you suddenly go, right, we're going to stop, we're going to do stakeholder management. It has to be built into the DNA of what you're doing. It has to happen right from that business case point. Risks and dependencies are clearly identified, so hopefully as you go through, you're actually working really constructively with those. And also it means that your people have actually got transferable skills that they can take to new projects. They can take that expertise and apply it to new areas of subject matter. And hopefully too, you've got project staff who are actually happy to do it again, rather than feeling that they were confused and burnt out and, you know, not quite sure where they were going with things. I was going to put in a picture of a fish floundering, but I decided that might just be one step too far. Okay, so some next steps for you. Start using the principles that we've outlined as simple tools. Build solid business cases. I know I've banged on about that, but it's just incredible. And check them often. It's really, really important. Remember the sandwich. And the other suggestion I have for you is to do an audit. There's actually a little template in your slide pack, which I don't know was printed very large, but basically just the idea is just to build something very simple in a spreadsheet. And it really goes back to that story that it's here, that I was telling earlier about that organisation that I work for that had this expertise in these individual silos, these pockets. If you can actually start to identify the people in your organisation who are actually got that thinking already, you can start to pull those people together and start to think about how you're actually going to develop a methodology within your organisation. It'll just help you get started identifying where those pockets of expertise are. So that's me. We think we've had a technical issue with the ebook that we were hoping to give you access to, but if you try and don't succeed, please try again in a few days. Hopefully we'll be able to get that sorted out. Please contact me if you feel that there's any way that we can assist you. And I also thought that I really ought to go back and use my own recipe and go back to my business case as to why I was talking to you and see. So hopefully we've addressed some common misconceptions, perhaps about project management. I've talked about lessons learned and how project methodology is built on lessons learned. What I probably didn't talk about was how project management potentially uses lessons learned in the sense of a feedback loop of when a project finishes and creating those kinds of opportunities. And I've only got 2 minutes. So did we talk about language and making it better? Hopefully, yes. Some benefits, yes, we did. And hopefully I've given you a couple of things to get you started back in your organisation. And I've probably got about 30 seconds if anyone has a question. But please also, if you've got questions or observations, actually very quickly too, we as an organisation are thinking of putting together maybe a one-day training course in project management basics for the not-for-profit sector to make sure that we're actually using language and imagery and things that would actually resonate well in the sector. So if that's of interest to anyone, please, we've got a table downstairs, so please come and see me at the break. We'd love to hear from you and hear your thoughts on that. Thank you very much.